Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. This week, we are diving into all things bipolar thriving with my awesome guest, Sarah Fox. Sarah is the host of the Rough Edges podcast, a poet, writer, creator, and mental health advocate working to eliminate the stigma associated with mental illness. I am so glad Sarah reached out to me on Instagram. So we have the opportunity to gain value from her story this week, you guys. So without further ado, welcome Sarah to the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. I'm so excited to talk with you because I know you guys, we were just talking a little bit on Instagram, just like back and forth and messages. And you guys will see with Sarah, like with the stuff that she's doing with speaking about mental health. You already know like how passionate I am about that and how excited I am to talk to anyone else with a story who's willing to share. So, Sarah, before we go ahead and dive on in, actually, let's do that right now. I would love if you could just kind of walk us through a little bit about your journey so far. So like share like what has your journey so far been like with bipolar disorder?
I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder in January of last year.
Mhm.
And so when that came, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know like who to talk to, where to go afterwards. And so I had a severe manic attack before that. So I got my diagnosis January 4th, and
Mhm.
I had a severe manic attack during the weekend of New Year's Eve. So I had the manic attack, and I also had a depressive episode
Mm.
where I was crying a lot and I was, really paralyzed within my body.
Mhm.
I wasn't getting out of bed, and it was just me being depressed.
Mhm.
And I had that mixed with the manic episode, which is kind of like you're on a high and you're
Mhm.
on cloud nine and you feel like you're on top of the world and you feel like you can conquer anything. So
Mhm.
I had those two like polar opposites that I was, competing with and just trying to get to that happy medium. Bipolar is really just you going back and forth between, different mood swings. So you have the depressive side and you also have the manic side. And I got diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. So
Mhm.
bipolar 1 is a little bit more severe than bipolar 2 and the other types of bipolar. And so with bipolar 1, you have mania, which is the severe version of the manic episode. The less severe version is hypomania, which is like you go through different cycles of feeling
Mhm.
extra happy and extremely vibrant and energetic, but you don't have a severe moment of having that type of mania.
Mm.
So with bipolar 1, you're on two extremes of the spectrum. You're either very depressed or you're very manic. And
Yeah.
so I was
Mhm.
between both of those things. And so
Oh
I
wow.
had that and I had to be hospitalized for about 3 weeks. And while I was in the hospital, they gave me my diagnosis and it was very crushing because they
Mhm.
just handed me a piece of paper and it was like a little packet and they were
Mhm.
like it had bipolar disorder on it and they were like, this is your diagnosis, and I'm just like, what? Like, what is happening right now? Like, I was just having such a wide array of emotions at the
Mhm.
sight of that paper. And I just remember me going back to my room and just feeling so devastated and lost. And I'm also a Christian. And so my faith has a big part of my healing journey. And I went and I prayed and I said, Lord, why is this happening? Like, what is this diagnosis and why do I have it? Like, of all the things, why do I have to be bipolar? And
Mhm.
so, fast forward a little bit, I decided to start Rough Edges because I didn't want other people to go through the same thing, the same type of confusion of like, why did I get this diagnosis? Who do I talk to? What is my treatment plan? What are my options? I wanted to be a resource for other people so that they wouldn't have to go through the confusion of
Mhm.
not knowing where to go and who to talk to and what to know in terms of like getting better.
Mm.
So
I
I
love
decided
that.
to go through
I
that.
love that. And just from hearing you share about that, I relate so much to everything you said because it's almost like the exact same kind of thing happened to me too. Like with me getting hospitalized, diagnosed with bipolar one, again, being given like that packet where it has the lit and you're just like, what? And then you kind of feel a little lost, a little confused, like crushed, but like kind of relieved. Like you kind of know, okay, this might kind of explain, but I don't know. I just feel kind of lost. So I love that you started Rough Edges to be that resource guide because that is amazing because I know there's so many people out there who, maybe they haven't been diagnosed, maybe they have, but they feel the exact same way that you did. And you having the ability and like vulnerability to actually share your story and come out and speak about it is having an impact and helping so many people. And I'd love to just to speak with you about this, but like, did you have, because I know you talked about when it first happened, like feeling really crushed by it. Like, how did you transition out of that to where you are now? Like, where you're writing about it, you have the podcast about it. How did you transition out of that mindset to the one that you're in now?
So it's funny that you say a transition because in a way, I feel like I'm still transitioning.
Hmm.
And so I definitely had a lot of prayer behind me, and I had a big support group with like my church family and also with my, immediate family and extended family and friends who were just really open to me talking about it and really just trying to process through everything. So I would say that my support group and prayer is the thing that got me to wanting to be vulnerable and share my story a little bit more.
I love that. And that's huge because you hear that all the time, just having a solid support system, like you said, group of friends, your church, family, those people around you who are there, supportive, positive, pouring into you all of these things because that really is such a huge factor. And I probably know you definitely understand that when you don't have that. And I'd love to also ask you just about, when you do this work with and I mean, I guess what I want to ask you too is like, what are things that you do on a daily basis to help you with, because I know things that I do, but I'd love to hear about what you do for just maintaining in a good level, in a good spirits. Like what kind of things do you do?
Yes, so I do a lot of writing.
Hmm.
I love to write. I have journals upon journals filled with just, thoughts that I, think and just trying to get my words out there. Poetry is another thing that helps me a lot because I have that artistic form to get to really express myself. Because it also helps to put these things on paper so that it doesn't feel so huge within your own mind and it doesn't feel so debilitating. So I use writing. I also listen to a lot of music, worship music specifically, just to get myself into the right frame of mind to be calm and peaceful throughout the day. And I also do some meditations. I listen to meditative music, and I also sit in silence for like 2 minutes at a time, and just refresh and reset my mind. And I also try to go on a lot of walks
Mm.
because I feel like walking, it not only enhances the physical aspects of your self-care, but it can also enhance your mind. And especially when you pay more attention to your surroundings as you walk. Especially, I love to walk in the park because I'm from New York. So walking in Central Park is really fun. And just,
Oh,
going around in like the botanical gardens. I don't go to the botanical gardens as often as I would like, but just having that nature, in the big city, trying to
oh,
find
sounds so amazing.
nature. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
those are
love
the things that
that.
I do.
Oh my, that those things are just so incredible because everything you just highlighted, especially the connection you just brought up right there of the physical connection and your mental connection, right? So, what you do for your physical body. So, you mentioned getting out, meditation, walks, sitting in silence, which is a really good one, which is actually something that I should start practicing more of just sitting in silence, no phone, no, constantly go, 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 constantly like what's on, what are we doing next? Like just being present I think is huge. And just hearing you talk about that of, getting outside, moving your body and noticing, like you noticing the effects of this because, I know like, I mean, if you can even speak about like what was your life like before you did any of these things? Like, did you have a period like when you received your diagnosis or came home from the hospital where you didn't do any of these things and you noticed how it affected you when you didn't do this stuff?
Oh, yes, especially when I started medication
Hmm.
and I had a lot of weight gain. That's when I wasn't really at my healthiest. And so I was I like to binge eat. So I was eating a lot of things that weren't, healthy for me. And I was just in a state of depression a little bit because, like, my medication, I just started it and it wasn't working to the effects that I wanted in the beginning.
Hmm.
So I was just feeling a little bit discouraged. And so I would eat my emotions and, like, just eat through my feelings. And that's very unhealthy. And
Hmm.
so I recognized that when I didn't exercise, when I didn't eat healthy, I put myself in a worse off position than I was before. And so, especially when you're taking medication, you have to have that balance of like eating healthy and also exercise because the nutrition part of it is really important, especially when you have medication that helps you pack on the pounds.
Hmm.
You really want to just make
Yes.
sure that you're keeping your weight in check.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good tip and so true and just like so powerful when you bring up like the connection between all of that with how you're treating your body, how this is impacting your mind, and especially the role of medication plays, right? Like when you're starting something new and then and that's something that I commonly hear for people, that I talk with who share, their journeys with being diagnosed bipolar of having like issues with medications or being on all these different ones and nothing's like helping or nothing's working and like the weight gain and then but what you said just is so true with the nutrition part of it because that's something that I hear in you and that I also see in myself with how I used to eat and just like very unstructured at random times all a bunch of amounts of food, very unhealthy things, didn't know what a vegetable, didn't know how to do anything with vegetables or fruit or whatever. It was just so bad.
Same.
But yeah, it was so bad. And I hear you so much because I can tell you like, and just hearing you speak about this, I can hear it in your voice as well. Like the difference that you've noticed from how you used to be and how you used to treat yourself, used to have your treat your body, your diet, all this stuff, and just how that affected your mental health and your feelings and your emotions and your thinking patterns and all of this stuff. So that's just incredible. Like just like hearing you like just that transition. And I love how you also mentioned like you're still transitioning because it's so true. Like we never, you're never done with the work. It's a continuous process of every single day, just trying to get better, trying to learn more, trying to grow. And obviously, like we all have bad days, we all have terrible moments. All of us, right? So I'd love to
Right.
ask you, like, what do you do on those days where you're having a really bad day or feeling really, really down, or like you're feeling like things are going too fast? Like, what do you do for yourself in those on those days?
So on those days, it's so funny because I had that type of day like this week.
Yes. Yes, me
So
too. Me too.
so it's amazing how you asked me to highlight some of the things that I do. Usually I try to do some self inventory.
Mhm.
I always try to look within because there's always a root behind something.
Mhm.
And so I look within myself and I see, okay, where are these thoughts coming from? Where are these feelings coming from? And try to pinpoint exactly the source behind these thoughts. And then I try to speak life to myself. Like another thing that I do is like try to speak the truth about what God says about me and to try to combat the lies that, the enemy is trying to feed to me. So it's really more of like a spiritual thing that I do. And I try to incorporate my spirituality into every aspect of my life because I truly believe that if you can have something to keep you on a great foundation and to keep you on a foundational level, then everything else will fall into place. And so I
Yeah.
also involve my community a lot. I reach out to my friends and sometimes I'm like, hey, I need an outsider's perspective on this. I'm having a hard time dealing with XYZ. I need some advice. And I always ask them if they are ready or mentally able to have the mental capacity to deal with like my venting because
Mhm.
sometimes, you could get carried away and like people don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to deal with your venting at the moment. So I always make sure my friends are, open and ready for me to, just unleash like all of my emotional baggage at once.
That's so I love that you bring that up too of, when you're doing that to help, but asking those people, right? Asking your friends, family, everyone, people in your church, your community, before you do that, because that's so true. Because, sometimes, it can be hard to see that when, you're so deep in a certain struggle, like you lose awareness of that. And that's amazing that like, because I know that's something that I found over the years that I did not have very early on. Like, I did not have that. So, being able to develop the awareness of, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now. It's not, the day's not going good, or these things are happening, or this is causing a lot of stress. I'm overwhelmed from this. You don't know how to handle it. And it all starts to add up. And I think that's amazing that you're able to do that and actually reach out to someone to ask for help and like more insight on this, especially people who know you well, so they can give you feedback to be helpful, because there's probably a lot of people out there who really want to do that, but they still feel like they're not exactly sure of how to start that conversation or how to reach out, because maybe they've never done it before, maybe they've tried to reach out and they feel like it isn't working, or it's not productive, or it's just they get down about it. So I'd love to ask you, like, if you have any kind of tip for starting that conversation. So like if you're someone maybe who's just been like newly diagnosed with bipolar, or you're really struggling, like how would that person, like what would you say probably for them to start the process of reaching out? Like what would that kind of look like?
Well, I would say ask questions
Mhm.
because if you don't ask the appropriate questions, you're not going to receive the answers that you want. So I would just ask a lot of questions. Like, for example, just ask, okay, is now a good time for us to talk about this? Because I have something that I need to tell you. And for sharing your diagnosis with someone else, that is a huge thing. And I do not take that lightly. I actually chose like specific people to tell in the
Mhm.
beginning because I first off, I needed somebody that I could trust. And secondly, I needed somebody who I knew would understand, because sometimes it's like you want to tell people, you want to tell as many people as you can to build that support system, but not everybody is going to understand. Some
Mhm.
people are going to be surprised. Some people are not going to have the reaction that you want. And so you got to understand like, this is who I want to tell. And you have to make sure that they are educated on these certain matters because you don't want to be the type of person to want to educate every single person that you come across because that's not your job. Your
Mhm.
job is not to educate. Your job is to share your vulnerable experiences and hope that the other person can understand and be a bridge to kind of help you move forward as well. So I would say ask questions and also don't be afraid to reach out because a lot of the times we are afraid of what the other person might say. We are afraid of what they would think of us. I know for me, I was afraid of judgment. I was afraid of, ridicule and people looking at me differently.
Mhm.
And you just got to move past that and say to yourself, look, I know this person, I trust this person, and they are going to help me move through this process. And so when you really build your community, it helps you to see that there is hope of getting over this. There is hope of being vulnerable and receiving the response that you need in that moment.
Yeah, and that's such amazing advice, you guys. Like in every single episode, I'm always taking notes. I literally have my notebook right here and I'm writing this down because I learn something every single time from everybody that I speak with. And what Sarah just said is so powerful because that's one of the things that holds us back is that fear of judgment, ridicule. But she said that's the important piece is the question aspect, right? So asking the right questions and also, not feeling like you need to educate everyone like she said because I feel like that can kind of be a feeling that might happen, when you have a diagnosis or something that happens, like you feel like okay, like I need to like let everyone know like what this is so that they understand it because like she said, not everyone is going to understand or maybe there's probably people out there who likely have had a bad experience with maybe a family member or someone close to them who's been diagnosed that has been very difficult for them. So when they hear this in you, they might give you a reaction that might not be like what Sarah said that you were wanting or hoping for that might actually hurt your progress and your recovery because it could prevent you from opening up further because this person, maybe reacted because they had a really bad experience and they still don't know how to deal with that and now they know you or they're getting to know you and they say okay, well this person's bipolar too, oh my gosh, like again I'm gonna have to deal with this.
Hmm.
So and that's a really common thing, so I love that you brought that up because that's huge, asking the right questions and understanding, again, like you said, the point of opening up, because that's really, boils down to what we're talking about here is that all of us struggle with something, at some point in our life, some moment, whether it be our mental health, whether it be hospitalization like we've had, or a diagnosis of bipolar one like we've both had, we've all had some experience or something that we can share. And like Sarah said, bridge the gap for others or for ourselves to move forward. So I love that you said that. That was such great advice. And the last question I absolutely love to ask every single person because everyone always gives a different answer. And it's always very insightful to see this. So I would love to ask you, Sarah, what are you currently doing right now in this moment to master your mental?
That is a great question. So, currently, what I'm doing is really just trying to become more vulnerable. I'm also trying to be a mental health advocate. And
Mhm.
so, through my podcast, through speaking on other podcasts like yours, which is one of the podcasts that I use to kind of help me get through. So, thank you so much for everything that you're
Oh, of
doing.
course, of course.
Yeah, and so what I'm doing right now is just being that bridge for other people and trying to connect them with the right resources, and also I'm trying to be more vulnerable on my end because it's important to practice what you preach. So if
Mhm.
you're telling other people to go out there and share their stories with people they trust, you have to do the same thing. So
Yes.
I'm practicing those things at the moment.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I relate again so much to what you're saying. And that's so true, right? Because, there's definitely certain moments, especially with what you're doing, right? Like having the Rough Edges podcast and, being that person to be that resource, because I feel the same way too. Like I have, we both have the podcast, we're sharing these stories, we're trying to help give resources, but that doesn't mean that we don't have days where we still have that fear come up of, oh, like,
Right.
I don't know if I should share, but then you get better as time goes on because you understand the greater mission behind it. And again, like you mentioned that not everyone is going to understand, and that's okay. That's okay. It's not, again, not our jobs to, preach on everyone and get ingrain that
Right.
into them, you know. So I love that, and I think that's amazing. And again, honestly, just thank you so much for, you know, like sharing what you share with me about my podcast, like, you know, tuning in and having this be a resource that's been helpful to you. That means so much to me to hear that, you know, I've had that impact on you, because I appreciate it so much, and it truly means more to me than I can even say in words, because it just makes me so
Oh,
happy to know that, you know, me doing this work and also you doing the work that you're doing is having an impact, and just touching one life is everything. So, Sarah, like, I just want to thank you so much for coming out here on Master Your Mental and just sharing these incredible tips, sharing your experiences, your story with your diagnosis, with the challenges and the things that you faced with bipolar and the diagnosis, and how you've gotten past a lot of this and how you're helping others. So I think it's amazing. And I had the best time talking with you. And I feel like we could just talk for hours on this. So I love it.
yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. And you guys listening, I want to give a big thank you to you as well for always being here and tuning in and just hearing these incredible stories. And just definitely, I'm going to go ahead and link Sarah's Instagram in the show notes here so you guys can check her out. Also, check out her podcast as well, Rough Edges Podcast. And thank you so much for just being here and listening. And I hope that it is a good day or a good night for you guys, whatever time you are checking into this. And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye to you guys and goodbye to Sarah. So bye, guys, and bye, Sarah. Bye.
Bye.